All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another trading day here. It's April, 16th or 17th here this morning, and it's a beautiful spring day, not a cloud in the sky. So, very great start here to the day. Yeah, I hope you guys are all doing well. Excited for what should be a interesting end to the week, and hopefully, right, and kind of get back on track here a little bit and return to some of like the processed based structures that ultimately have made me pretty successful. I've been a little bit frustrated this week, I think, with just like the price action in general, getting like a little bit of deja vu, sorry, to price action from a couple weeks ago, where kind of just like one up, one down, one up, one down, one up, one down. And that's been a little bit like frustrating, right? For sure. And kind of saw myself, yeah, make decisions yesterday there that I honestly just got super lucky with, right? I don't really have any other variant or like excuse besides that. It was a decision that was not really a part of my rules. Probably should have been stopped out on that trade, and ultimately got lucky, right? Got bailed out making a mistake. And that's something that I need to be very like upfront about, right? And I apologize for maybe the lack of communication there, right? And things along those lines. So, objective here today, right, is to not allow that type of sensation or that type of trading to occur. It's generally not a good feeling, and generally a bit of an indication for me, right, when I start to break those types of rules, then maybe I'm a little bit like too dopamine drained, right? Maybe like a little bit too frazzled, or just like a little bit deviating away from objectivity, right? And that's it happens. There's always going to be those kind of highs and lows there as traders. And so definitely caught myself, right, on sort of the extreme variant of that there yesterday. And so what today's job is, right, is to catch that pattern, right, notice that mistake, and then revert back to being the disciplined, structured, and profitable trader that I know I can be to a certain extent, right? And this is going to sound kind of like a bullshit excuse, but excuse me. It's I think a lot of the changes that I've made here so far this year have been extremely positive changes because I'm finishing a lot more days green than I am finishing red. I've had I finish 80 something percent of my days here in the green, and that's fantastic, right? That's something that's very positive. But what that does, right, is you have all that evidence, is it kind of makes each red day, or each kind of like even intraday drawdown feel just like a tad bit more personal, right? A tad bit more unfamiliar. And that's something that I need to be a little bit more aware of here, because it isn't personal, right? The market doesn't give a shit. All it is, right, is it's me portraying my insecurities, and kind of my stresses and my anxieties, right, into my P&L, and then effectively attaching all my self-worth to that. And that's not a particularly healthy place to be as an individual. I think that's just too much of a roller coaster. There's too much volatility in this career to effectively behave that way. And it's not something that I'm particularly proud of, or something that I particularly enjoy experiencing. But that's what this game is, right? It's identifying your problems, finding solutions to them, fixing them, and making the next time you encounter that same issue for it to be less severe, and less severe. And then eventually, right, you start to live, right, with your ability to solve for those mistakes or protect yourself from like the worst variants of them. And the reason why I'm stressing this so much is because yesterday I got rewarded for a bad habit, right? So it's very easy to trick myself into thinking that, hey, it actually isn't a problem. I'm still making money. Like we say all the time, right? P&L is a lagging indicator. And most of the time that we talk about that, we're talking about that as a way of it being a positive indicator, right? Of when you improve your technique, when you improve your skill, it catches up to that ability. But when you're kind of trading with like a little bit of that frothy anxiety, or kind of like that highly volatile environment, then what it is, right, is once you start making bad habits, you might be rewarded for them in the short term, but then it always catches up, right? It becomes the trade that breaks you, maybe not this trade, but the next one, right? Or the one after that. And you end up giving back all that P&L and then some. And I think ultimately there's a couple ways to combat that. So obviously one, right, it's focus on controlling your dopamine, right? And kind of like resetting yourself to be as objective as you can be. But the way that you avoid, right, giving back P&L or making dumb decisions is taking a withdrawal, getting yourself paid, right, and making sure that that money becomes real instead of money that the market can take from us. So today, after today's trading session, I'm going to be taking a pretty nice payout here, and hopefully, right, just kind of like a nice little reward for fighting, right, and putting myself in a situation where I got to reset and kind of recontrol some of those effective variables. With that being said, right, I still am very excited about today's trading day. I'm optimistic I'm going to get some good opportunities. I'm hopeful that we can take advantage of some of this volatility that's available to us. And certainly, right, seems like we've got an opportunity to hopefully finish off the week here with a bang. It has effectively been a week of consolidation going into a day of option expiration into a long weekend, right? So markets are closed here tomorrow for Good Friday, religious holiday, and then back to their normal psychotic best on Monday. So we might get a little bit of a strange day of price action here today. And so you just want to be a little bit more cautious, right? A little bit more deliberate here this morning, just to make sure that I'm controlling for, or expecting, I should say, potentially some of that early chop prior to moves kind of occurring. The general theme we've also seen here so far this week is that trades are taking a little bit longer to develop, and the early like morning price action, the first 30 minutes, the first 45 minutes, even the first hour is kind of like choppy nonsense while we wait for everyone to get frustrated and then the market to give us a move. So we've seen that here multiple times this week, which I think is going to just slow me down just a little bit here this morning and make sure that I'm not, like falling in love with an early signal just to feel like I've got action on the table. And that's something that I want to kind of be very aware of here today, right? Again, notice your patterns before they cost you money is kind of the theme here. And chasing those kind of early losing trades in what ends up being a very choppy market just drains my mental capital, because you get failures to the upside, you get failures to the downside, and it's just like you're wrong without price action moving, and it's always like going in the other way of your previous setup. And that's, I think, a very frustrating bit of price action to handle with. So I want to be really, really patient and really deliberate. The other element that could potentially be introduced, right, because we've seen this also play out here multiple times, is effectively turning our stop loss here into our entry price. So what that means, right, is buying once the fake out has occurred. We've seen that price action here happen kind of multiple times. And so we'll talk through that a little bit here if we kind of get the evidence that continues to be sort of the narrative this morning. But we're not going to galaxy brain it. I'll walk you guys through that process, make sure that continues to be consistent. And again, right, we'll find ourselves that opportunity. So today, right, I've got a couple objectives, or I got a couple goals. One, give myself like a little bit of an intraday dopamine detox. Really focus on detaching my ego and my emotions outside of sort of the trading realm. Right. So just be really focused on being a technician, being technically proficient, being a clear and kind of concise communicator, and just putting myself in situations where it's easy for me to take advantage of the market that's there. If I don't get an opportunity, that's fine. I can walk away here on the week kind of feeling more lucky than skillful, and I'm okay with that, right? If that's the case. And the evidence I have here of this week that it's a highly combustible kind of bit of price action, and so I don't need to be too aggressive, right, and give away P&L that maybe I don't deserve, right? So those are really the elements to focus on, and then just really being objective with price action here as much as I can, and getting a clear feel of, is it kind of like that trend day. Is it that shake and fake day? Is it a day of consolidation? And then making or adjusting decisions based on that. Yeah, Robert, you're spot on. The contract roll for CL here is going to be finishing up. There might be still a few little we'll call it divergences, right, between kind of price action and volume. I'm not super aggressively going to trade CL here again today. It's just not worth introducing that extra technical element, right? We already have all that option expiration, and we're expecting kind of a inconsistent flow from that as people elect their positions. That might get a little bit chaotic there as the roll is also occurring. It's just going to create an environment where high volume signals become low conviction because you don't know if that's just people moving to a different contract, right? Or if they're electing to buy or sell. And so it just might create a little bit of some false volume signals. So yeah, very good thing to kind of point out here this morning. All right. So with that being said, team, 24-hour rule in effect. Today is a fresh slate, new day, and no holding on to yesterday's baggage, right? Wednesday's baggage, Monday's baggage, and no feeling like the ego, right, of a big win or the pain of a big loss. We want to be the steady surgeon, right? Hand doesn't shake. We're not here to play the roller coaster. We're here to trade the markets. And so emphasis goes back to that, right? Talk about this all the time. But really, trading is a game where the best loser fundamentally wins. And the best losers don't hold on to baggage, right? They don't hold on to mistakes. They don't allow those to compound into further trading days. And so that's really going to be the obsession here this morning, to not put myself in a situation where I'm doing something stupid. Yeah. All right. So let's get after it here, guys. First things first, right? We got the economic calendar. So we got jobless claims here this morning. Housing starts, fine. We got some Fed speak here later. Cool. And we got nat gas storage, fine. So nothing too crazy. And yeah, let's get after it. So what's the count here on ES? Let's start there. Yeah, 2 out of 3 here to the downside. With volume, but yeah, like Jack is saying, it's right, not really outlier volume. It's the biggest of the week, but it's still not very impressive relative to kind of like what the average is there on the indexes. So I'll call this a 2 out of 3 with weak vol. So it does give me a little bit of flexibility here to trade in either direction as we effectively remain inside this zone of consolidation. Generally, the theme we've been talking about here recently, right, is when you kind of do have these consolidation type bits of price action, maybe that sets up a little bit better for that like mean reversion type trade. So we'll keep our eyes out for those opportunities here this morning. And again, filtering out for kind of the longer time frames there. Again, forcing myself to just slow down incy bit. To the upside here, we're targeting a move towards 53.70. And every day I'm changing these levels like crazy. So 53.70, right, to the upside, and then eventually targeting a move up towards 5,500 is probably a little bit too aggressive. But if I can get to like 54.50, I think that would be a pretty reasonable target. And then in general, right, my thesis for setting sort of these lines or these levels, said that weird, is to look for the either previous pre-market high, right, or the previous daily high, and then just round up towards those numbers. So like if we look at, yesterday's high a day, right, that's approximately 54.27, right, and today's pre-market here is approximately 53.70. So all I'm doing, right, is taking those two benchmarks and then filling it in with what I believe to be about a reasonable move here on ES. For me, that's about 10 points at a time. So I'm just filling in that gap. I don't expect it to happen all in one candle. If it does, great, but I'm trying to basically fill in the box here or color in between the lines so that I do get that consistent bit of price action or like that, maybe not consistent, say realistic bit of price action, so that it's easy for me to get good risk reward ratios, right? But also kind of rein in my greed here a little bit by not thinking that it's going to move 80 points in 2 5-minute candles. So that's sort of my technique there. And yeah, basically just looking for the difference between previous days highs and lows, or like weekly highs and lows, monthly highs and lows, and then filling it in with like a very reasonable kind of 10-point move. On NQ, we do that as 100 points. But that's kind of just what we think is a realistic kind of target. This morning, right, we're at 52.90 here as my pre-market. So I already got that mapped out there from yesterday. And then we can target down towards, 5,200, I think is a pretty reasonable zone, right? We've got that 5,250 already mapped out there as our low. So again, just 10 points along the way down towards sort of that 5,200. That makes sense? All right, fantastic. All right, NQ, what's the count? How do we feel? Yeah, very similar story, right? 2 out of 3 here to the downside. Maybe a slightly more impressive volume standard on NQ, but nothing that's like a Dear John letter. Like you wouldn't write home about this. On NQ, trendline rejection. Something like that, Jack? Is that kind of what you're asking about? Yeah, I would say that kind of covers that point of contact. I could see that, right? Makes sense that it's kind of consolidating at trend line resistance. So if it does break out over that 415, I think that becomes our indication, right, of nice trending markets. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no issues there. To the downside, right, we're targeting a move towards pre-market lows, so 18,300. Again, just rounding it down to the nearest round number. And then we've got what, 18. And then I can maybe go down towards like 17.5 would be kind of like a final point here. Cool. All right, so CL, we've got, the roll should be switching over here today. I guess like the thing to be concerned about here a little bit with CL, right, is we're going to get potentially some mismatching data, or we're going to have, like we might have to just trade the specific contract itself, right, instead of trading CL1. So I'm going to still say, just with the roll, I'm not going to trade this. It introduces too many extra variables I don't want to deal with inside a relatively choppy market. So if it's going to give us a trend breakout here or find support off of these lows, we could take advantage of that Monday going forward. But short term, I don't think I need to be honestly hyper aggressive here. I can be relatively deliberate and just kind of sit this one out. Okay, Apple. Similar narrative as the indexes, right? 2 out of 3 here to the downside with weak increasing vol. Looks fine. Tesla, same thing. 2 out of 3 here to the downside with weak increasing vol. Microsoft, strong candle. Same thing. Okay, Amazon, pretty big gap up, pretty weak bar. Hey, good morning, Mike. Okay, AMD, 3 for 3 here to the upside. I'll call that a weak 3 for 3, right? It's weak because it's a doji candle. So although it's really impressive volume, we know that that volume is basically just a tug of war based on what that candle shape is telling us. So still relatively indecisive price action, very much in the middle, right, of kind of like that Wednesday of last week's range. So I'd be a little bit patient here. Let's see if this thing wants to give us a nice oomph. NVIDIA, technically a 3 for 3 here to the downside. We'll call this a weak 3 for 3. And it's weak not because of volume, it's weak because of the candle shape, right? So again, we know that a lot of that volume there yesterday, right, was buyers effectively defending that $100 barrier. So this might just be a day of consolidation before this is ready to kind of give me a nice oomph. Okay, Meta. And 2 out of 3 here to the downside with weak volume. Looks chill. Netflix inside bar going into earnings. Classic. Anecdotally, I always feel like Netflix earnings are always like the wildest movers. All right, Google, technically a 3 for 3 here to the upside, a weak 3 for 3 to the upside. And then the old Vixaroonie hanging out 30 spot 7-8. So we've got about 2% of implied range here this morning. And so that's definitely a lot, right, for us to deal with here if we can get that. What we've seen so far, though, with where the VIX been hanging out at and kind of just like the correlation to price action is we've had highly volatile small ranges, which is, it's kind of like a bit of an oxymoron. But I think like even yesterday, right, on the trade where I got lucky, the move that happened to the upside was just like a pure 5-minute explosion. And then it just bled out that entire move for the remainder of the session, right? Like it was a freaking rapido move and then just die, right? So, effectively, I want to avoid that type of price action here just as much as possible because it's so mentally draining. And I don't want to deal with that. That's not fun. And so I want to get back to having fun trading these markets here this week. It hasn't felt that way. It has felt, it's kind of just felt like you're getting your teeth punched in a little bit. So it's not been a blast. The P&L here doesn't really justify the stress, and want to make sure, right, that I'm just being very deliberate and not forcing or rushing anything. I think one of the things that I was much better at this time last year than I am right now was a little bit more stubborn with taking trades that, maybe I had just like a stricter filter. Maybe let's put it that way. I think that's probably a better way of describing it. A slightly stricter filter on how I wanted to attack price action. And I've kind of, the change in style to trading the opening range has given me more opportunities and it's given me more daily setups. I'm averaging like 3 or 4 trades a day. Maybe there's like a middle ground there where I'm still getting, averaging 1 or 2 trades a day, but being a little bit more discerning. And so I want to think about that a little bit. That might be something that I kind of ponder on my drive. I'll have plenty of time to think, but something to consider here, something I'm kind of aware of a little bit, and just trying to, get back to being just more in control, I think, over how I'm reacting to price action. And I'm trying to hold myself here to a very high standard because, I think it's very easy to trick yourself into thinking that price action is better than it is in these highly volatile environments. And, like fool me once, shame on you, right? Fool me twice, shame on me. So I'm kind of on that like shame on me type environment here. And so I want to make sure that I'm like effectively overcorrecting for that chop to a certain extent and expecting that to be the case instead of expecting it to be a breakout just because we have that highly volatile environment. So a lot of things to be kind of aware of here this morning. I want to basically make sure that I'm not rewarding any bad habits. And from there, I think I'm going to be in a really good position to keep kind of building up and kind of stacking up what's been a good but confusing week. So last trading day here of the week, right? Markets are closed tomorrow. So let's make sure that we're not doing anything that we're going to have to go to confession for here over the weekend. And then from there, right, let's put ourselves in a good situation to just stack up wins, compound our positive decisions, and just focus on the variables that we can control. About 5 minutes here till market open. So I'm going to go make myself a quick cup of coffee, take the old dog out for a quick little jaunt, and then be back at it again here in a couple minutes. And we'll step back up and get ready for what should hopefully be a successful trading day. Talk to you guys all then, and be back in 2 or 3 minutes. All right, guys. So yeah, let's get after it. Let's see how the our leading names kind of rock and roll here this morning. So yeah, they're all gapping up into the implied middle of effectively their previous day's ranges. So from just like a bias expectation, right? That gives us a kind of like tilt or lean towards it being a day of consolidation, right? Because it's got a lot of work to do before it breaks out higher highs or lower lows. So maybe a little bit of a choppier, slower day. And yeah, let's see how it shapes up here, team. Yeah, gonna be deliberate, right? Gonna be patient, right? And basically just not allow myself to feel the pressure to make a bad decision. It's not a slight on anyone here or anything along those lines, but I think a big part of me as a trader, right, is I love trading because it's fun, right? It's my favorite thing that I do on a daily basis. And, truth be told, right, having a position on is more enjoyable, right? The idea of having a position on is more enjoyable than the idea of just watching green candles go or red candles go. And so I understand that that's like a little bit of a bias, maybe not a great one for me to have. And I want to make sure, right, that I'm not trading just for entertainment or to be exciting or to justify everyone kind of watching, right? I want to only be trading when it's my perfect A+ opportunity, when I have high conviction setups, I've got confidence that my idea is going to work, and just allowing things to kind of slip or to massage a rule, right, to be able to get a trade so we all can have some fun. I don't think that's like the healthiest approach for me to be able to trade the markets. And so really just acknowledging that that's a bit of a bias and not going to let that get in the way here today, right? My trading is constantly the best, or it's constantly at its sharpest when I am being, or I'm the most focused on the technical elements behind my trading. Like that, for me, at least that technical obsession over understanding why I'm making certain decisions and controlling my reactions to those triggers around those decisions. Like when my energy is put into those variables, I make so much more money than when I'm trading like an emotional roller coaster, or I'm attaching my ego to my P&L or those sort of things. So for me, the hedge here today, right, or like the emphasis, I should say, maybe not the hedge, the emphasis I'm putting on myself here today to be just very technically sharp and be structured about the elements that make my trade strong. Everything else is a compromise, and everything else risks me putting myself at risk of effectively going on tilt, right, or draining my mental capital, or I don't know, just like not feeling happy, right, about my trading. And that's the worst place to be, especially on a long weekend. Kind of just sit and fester on it, right? And I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound like fun. So my objective here, right, be very deliberate, be very specific, right? Control my variables exceptionally well. And if I do all those things, I'm very confident the market's going to give me plenty of opportunities here to kind of execute my edge here. If I choose to kind of rush that, then I think I put myself in a situation where it's similar to yesterday, where like, okay, yeah, you can throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And if you target a good enough risk reward, right, eventually something will stick and something will kind of pay you out. But it's a super stressful way to behave on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's like the most crude variant of being able to execute my edge, and the crudeness of it deteriorates basically how sharp the P&L is, right? Or how successful the idea is. And it puts me in situations where, yeah, just the roller coaster is too much, right? I don't want that. It's not fun. So, yeah, looking forward to hopefully having a really structured and really hopefully profitable trading day. But I'm going, honestly, for like a no bullshit approach here from myself perspective, right? That's really what I'm judging myself on. I'm judging myself on, did I follow my rules to the T here today? Did I execute within kind of the parameters of my plan? And did I execute an element of control here over the market instead of the market giving or controlling me and my decision. So if I can say, an affirmative response to all of those kind of like pain points, then I'm going to have a great day. If I don't, then I set myself up for like a coin flip day. I don't want a coin flip day. That's not fun, right? So, that for me is really all I have to say about, I'm going to approach today's session. Hopefully that makes some sense. But yeah, just kind of the raw thoughts there of how I'm going to protect myself from myself here this morning. How's everyone feeling today? That CL candle's disgusting. Oh my gosh. Horrific. Great to hear that, team. Love it. It's Thursday, Kyle. It's Thursday. Yeah, me too, Roberto. I'm very much looking forward to it. I got a busy week, but next week you guys are you're gonna see a stressed Michael. Yeah. Doing all my packing in my place in Montreal, getting it ready to be keys turned over. So just doing all the organizing, figuring out my freaking drive schedule. It's going to be a nightmare. So far, NQ is kind of bouncing off of 400. So that would be now the setup trigger for us to really watch out for, right? Get a break and hold here through that 400 barrier if we're going to trust any of those downside stories. So again, pretty slow early. We've seen a pretty nasty fake out, at least on CL. That's disgusting. Gosh. I feel pretty vindicated in avoiding that here today. Don't see the alpha in that. And okay, longer time frames here, maybe on ES and NQ are starting to set up a little bit, maybe for that breakout trade. Pretty challenging for us to get increasing volume here on the second bar of the day. And we didn't get it on either the second or the third here yet on NQ. So it might just take a little bit longer for this setup to mature. Again, right, I've got no problems with that. Effectively, what we've seen here from the markets this week has effectively been that, right? Where it's kind of froth around for the first hour, and then it gives you sort of a clean move and kind of wipes out everyone. And so it's like creating max frustration, right, prior to its making sort of its clean move. And so what I want to do here, right, is basically avoid those price action scenarios where for my system, it's giving me those max frustration plays. That loses its appeal. Okay, so again, NQ not really giving us a good reaction here post 400. So if we're trying to be objective here with how we're viewing PA, what's the early story? Yeah, chop, right? Consolidation, failed breakouts, right? A failed 400 breakout here. And this is setting up as like a fake out scenario trade. Maybe this could be in play. Immediately would have to be the aggressive entry technique. And I'm going to try to give this as much time as I possibly can to see this thing fail. Right? Instead of being super presumptuous that it's going to run and go. Because I've seen everything fail here, right? But again, I'm being very patient here, right? Base expectation is chop until proven otherwise. Like I don't even have my order window set up here yet, right? I'm giving this every possible opportunity I can to watch, right? And prove to me that this is different than the bullshit I've seen so far this week, right? So that's really what I am caring about here. Now that's a better reaction for sure. Put my stop loss in the 433 area. And now, right, we want to see that 455 act as support here for a continuation move higher. We effectively found buyers, right, defending these lows. So if buyers are actually strong, right, they're not going to get stuck at the previous candle's high. So that now becomes the next element that we're watching here as this setup continues to develop. If they fail there, right, or they're not able to turn that into an area of support, then exactly like we're seeing here right now, impossible to trust this narrative, right? So, okay, set a couple, call it benchmarks, right, for NQ to give us an indication of strong behavior. I would say that it failed both benchmarks. Right? And I'm going to stay away and not take this trade. Maybe it'll set up here on a longer time frame, right? So maybe I'll get that increasing outlier volume opportunity right on the 5, or right, this gives me an increasing volume standard here, or like a least bearish candle or something along those lines. But so far, I think we've made a pretty good decision here avoiding this trade. And yeah, bought ourselves enough time to make a rational decision. Ended up being the right call. Okay, right? Treat that as a win. That's a process-based win there. Didn't rush into what would have been a losing trade, and no complaints. Okay, good, right? Positive start. Right, and what I'm trying to emphasize here for myself, I'm getting some weird alerts. What I'm trying to kind of figure out here for myself, right, or remind myself here, is like of these process wins, right? Hey, you are seeing the market correctly. You're like trying to refine my gut or hone it in, right? Give it its like signal that it can rely on. So the more obvious, right, that I make those patterns to myself, easier it is to effectively execute kind of without any hesitation. So did a good job there making what we wanted to have seen kind of relatively binary, right? Find support off those lows. If those bulls are strong, they're going to hold the previous high a day or previous high of our confirmation candle. Once that high can't hold or isn't holding, then we know it's not a dip buy worth buying. Okay, so now, right, we're looking for ES and NQ to break down under their low of day, right, on increasing outlier volume. So we've seen now, right, that bullish reversal fail and fail pretty spectacularly at this point. So if bears are strong, right, bears are now going to be able to wipe out that price action with increasing outlier volume. Now we got 50 seconds to go. We maybe have a chance of getting there. ES maybe NQ may be the one more to watch than ES, because ES still hasn't broken through that previous low of day, whereas NQ has given us that little move under that bit of price action. So we want to see that area hold here. And then, maybe that's telling us that NQ is the leader, right, in the clubhouse, and NQ is ES is kind of the follower. So we'll see if that ends up being the case here. 20 seconds to go. We've got increasing volume. We need to see it go outlier, and we need to see it close under 384. So all we have right now is a setup, right? We're looking for a confirmation of that setup with a break, close, and hold under low of day on a volume standard that is different, right, than what we've seen. So yes, good candle-ish. Didn't hold lows. Increasing volume, not quite an outlier. So again, I can stay away from this pretty easily, as it's telling me that it's no different than the kind of price action here I've seen so far. And what I'm really trying to do here this morning, right, and it's on purpose, is I'm trying to talk through every like tick of price action, right? I'm trying to be very detailed over what I'm wanting to see from price prior to wanting to jump in. What I've kind of defaulted to here a little bit this week, right, is wanting to see a big move instead of seeing the correct move in between some of our kind of key zones. So I'm going to go stream of consciousness here as much as possible, right, today, as I'm kind of walking through some of that process. So let me know if there's something that I miss or you guys want more clarity on. But this is really where I'm putting all my energy into here today. If I put all my emphasis right into being as objective as I can with price action and defining what I see, it's going to remove a lot of that anxiety and hesitation and detach me from that like ego-based decision. So that for me is really, really what I want to focus on, right? Defining how you want to see price action move is something that you do before a setup, right? Once a setup is in, and it will allow you to manage your positions more effectively. So instead of having to panic close a losing trade or give back, right, a significant amount of P&L, I should remain a little bit more detached and objective so so that I can execute from a technical perspective instead of a P&L based perspective, right? Obviously, I'm here to make money, and my long-term objectives are P&L tied. But if I'm holding myself to that standard on a trade-to-trade basis, I'm honestly just going to lose my mind with like rewarding insecurities or rewarding ego. And I think going too far in either direction there is a disaster or a disaster waiting to happen. So I want to be very, very deliberate here with how I'm defining price action. And hopefully I can communicate that very well this morning. Ken, right? Good decisions here so far. Essentially, our first example there of using that fake out entry, right, as being our appropriate kind of entry logic, right? You bought the fake out there through low of day, maybe that then becomes like the more tradable opportunity. The way that I would do it, right, is have entry price there at 378, right, and then stop loss either at the low of your entry candle, right, or 25 points, as long as it's within the risk reward zone. ES increasing, but not outlier volume. So I'm going to have to pass on this one as well, right? It's really good candle shape. It's telling me whatever, but there's nothing about that volume profile that indicates a change from the chop or like the indecision that we've seen here so far today. So although this looks like it could be a potential opportunity here for a breakout, there's nothing from like a technical perspective that would indicate to me that we do have that change in personality. One of my favorite kind of beliefs, right, is that the market is going to behave like it always has until we get that proven otherwise. And I wouldn't view that volume standard as anything close towards sort of that proven otherwise. So very much seems like a one up, one down, bit of price action here so far today, maybe two up, two down. And so I'm going to continue to be very patient and deliberate, reminding me very much, right, of some of that kind of like indecisive PA we've seen early on in this week's trading sessions, where it kind of gives us, fake outs in both directions prior to it giving you that aggressive move. So I'd rather be patient and miss a challenging trade versus rush into something just for the hope, right? Regardless of how limited the probability actually is. The thing that I probably deviated away from a little bit this week here, right, is that I have not wanted to only trade the easy bits of price action. Kind of been wanting to trade every bit of price action. So today, right, and I think like a good default to work back towards, right, when you're feeling a little bit agitated, is if it's not easy, I don't want it. And I want to make sure that my price action here is as easy as possible. The only way that things do get easy, right, is when they follow my rules perfectly and there's no room for interpretation. So the more variables I have to account for, the more exceptions I have to put into my trades, the more skipped steps I put in, the more anxiety I build onto my decisions, and then the more likely I am to compound mistakes. So that then becomes, right, a not easy trade, becomes something that becomes high stress, right, whatever you want to call it. And I want to avoid those types of reactions here as much as possible, because they're kind of counter to how I want to kind of behave or live my life here in general, right? I've introduced the character Stoic Mike over the last like couple weeks, right? And I think attaching my ego to my P&L or like to the outcome of each trade is fundamentally not that version, right? Ultimately, I think I'm my best trader when I am very emotionally in control, and associating my ego with those decisions ultimately is a very expensive way to realize that my ego actually is hurting me. There's another to kind of go on that like stoic, whatever you want to call it, but there's a great book by Ryan Holiday, who is effectively like a YouTube stoic philosopher. But he wrote a book, right, called Ego is the Enemy. And in trading, it very much is. And I want to make sure, right, that I'm not doing anything too crazy with that in mind, right? I don't think that there's a prison mic, not yet. But if we ever do a diversity day here, we'll bring them out. Okay, so ES again increasing but not outlier volume. Yeah, CL with the roll, with the option expiration, it looks like it's a disaster. So like even just like looking at that chart, it seems stressful. I don't see the appeal. I'm glad to get that stuck in your head, Rebecca. So that little ding, I don't know if you guys heard it. It was an NQ bearish 2-minute reversal. Let's do a little bit of boxing in here. You're kind of targeting a move towards that blue line, right? That would kind of be your starting point. And then it would be something like this, right? So an 83 would be your stop loss. Yeah, so I'm going to start to set this up a little bit and start to watch. Yeah, 483 stop loss. Be a one contract play, right? And I need to get a pullback here to be within at least 25 points of this stop loss location. Right, so about, we'll call it 58 or better. So don't think I'm going to get that opportunity there. And I'm not going to go looking for an entry here now based on this candle, because I've seen this second candle, right, often act as like a fake out opportunity, right, where it then gives you a quick lower low like we've seen here now, and then rips higher, right, creates all sorts of frustration, and then dumps. Okay, no opportunity there for me. Even though it looked tempting there for a second. We do have data dropping in 2 minutes. So it could be an opportunity for us. Yeah, I don't really feel like I've missed anything here. Let's see if we made the right decision. This would have been the stop. Yeah, pretty slow start here. And definitely very bouncy conditions here to start the day off. The longer I've been watching this price action, the more my YouTube algorithm is all like trampoline and gymnastics videos. All right, so again, good decision, right? That would have been our stop loss. All right, stop loss would have been 83, just saw an 85. Yeah, saved some money. VWAP's definitely been a magnet here this week, absolutely. It doesn't really want to separate above or below. It just wants to drive you insane in between. So yeah, it's a very a good call. But yeah, I've not missed out on anything here yet. And feel very this is by design, but feel very calm here this morning, right? Like this is a proactive decision to have felt this way here today. I'm comparing to the calmness I felt 24 hours ago. I was like a maniac, right? Relative to this. Yeah, CL looks a disaster. Again, breakout, not outlier volume. Breakout, not outlier. That's all just compromises here so far. Boring, but I'm in my second most profitable position. Can't really complain about that. Again, maybe another opportunity, right, where that fake out would have been the best entry. Right, a high volume candle, a little fake out, and then it bounces. Now, it doesn't sustain here, but we've seen that fake out now play out a couple times. Let's see if this wants to fake out the old ES. Again, I don't have a valid confirmation here, right? So I'm not interested in placing this trade. I'm more watching to see if like I can build context, right? If I do take another position here later in the morning, or I take a first position, I should say, later here in the morning. All right, so I want to, yeah, basically, I mean, I'm not going to memorize price action. That's probably impossible, but I want to get a feel for how things are moving here. And without having a positional bias right now, or like I'm not looking for an immediate entry, a little bit easier to see each tick for what it is instead of like thinking, oh, if I don't buy this pullback now, I'm never going to get the entry, or feeling as if I need to chase this bit of price action. I can still look at it relatively objectively. And I think the more screen time effectively I put in here, the easier it is for me to then trust the intuition I have, right? Once a trade is moving. Yeah, kind of a strange week. Kind of a strange day. I say one thing I'm really looking forward to. We'll be back in Civilization, right, on the weekend. And I am really looking forward to getting a haircut. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just my hair gets very poofy. It looks like I have uh like a garbage bag filled with air on my head. No. No. I refuse to put that opportunity to be blackmailed out onto the internet. Okay, so again, right, watching for a high conviction, high volume separation here away from these lows. Have a good chance, right? We're back under that 400. Ideally, right, want it to see it hold under the area where price action has failed here before. Another failure, right, starts to maybe make you feel as if it's another Fugazi fake out, right? Because if bears are strong, like this volume is indicating, then they'd be able to hold lower lows, right? That's effectively what our analysis is telling us, right? So I'm asking myself, okay, if this price action was strong, how would that behave? Well, in my opinion, right, moving down that extra 25 points, getting to that outlier volume and holding through that level would be the starting point for strength. Right? A failed move at that price, right? Just tells us more of the same kind of bullshit we've seen here so far today. And maybe it seems like more of the latter than the former here. So what we'll do, right, is we'll pass on this burden of confirmation now to a longer time frame. So see if we get either that fake out under low of day or that breakdown here under low of day on this 5-min candle on increasing outlier volume. ES in a similar scenario. But again, NQ's at relative lows compared to the other index. So again, watching NQ here to the downside. And let's see if we can give me a break and hold under that blue line. Seems to be effectively rhyming with what the 3-min candle did. Excuse me. Yeah, good decision. Not mess with anything there on CL. Not enough volume there on the 10. Not enough volume there on the 10 either. So continually now waiting, right, for just a consistent setup narrative. All the information I've gathered here from price action so far today is telling me chop, indecision, maybe even frothiness. So it's hard to want to feel aggressive right now. And to a certain extent, this is how price action has behaved all week, right? It's been kind of that like big range open and then flirt with the lows, flirt with the highs, and just like trap everyone before making a significant move. We've seen the story play out a bunch here this week, right? Fake out higher, fake out lower, fake out higher, break down. Fake out higher, fake out lower, fake out higher, finally break down, right? So all the information we're probably getting here so far is a day of consolidation, right? Or a day where it might take a little bit longer for a move to develop, right? Or to tick every box for us here so far. I'm not seeing many boxes get ticked yet. How's everyone feeling here so far? Everyone feeling chill? Good, good. My YouTube guests, how you guys doing? Yeah, if we get that breakout back over 507, I'd be right there with you. Love to hear that, Steve. So I need to mention this as well. I mean, we got a little bit of time, so we got some operational stuff to talk about. Right, next week, obviously, stream is going to be going as usual. Right, there's not going to be any interruptions there. Like I said, I'm going through that process of moving, so there might be a like a decent chance that my computer gets packed up. My like normal streaming computer gets packed up here, and just like stays in the car or whatever, right? And I don't like rebuild my office there while I'm just temporarily in Montreal. If that's the case, right, the next week I'll be streaming from my travel setup, which totally works, no issues there. I don't think that there'll be a significant difference in anything. I don't think you guys have ever really noticed it before for when I've used it, but I've not tried running the travel setup while streaming on both Discord and YouTube from the same machine. So if that does end up being the case and it doesn't work, next week might be a YouTube only type stream. I hope that isn't the case. But yeah, I'll figure that out. Yeah, basically as I make my move, and we'll see how easy it is to pack up my car. But just wanting to share that with you guys all. So if it's YouTube only next week, just bear with me. Not going to change any of the quality here of the stream or our ability to be profitable. But just want you guys to be aware if that change does come into place. there'll be a few possible alternatives that we could do, right? If that's the scenario. I could probably do like Discord voice through my phone or something along those lines. So we can figure that out as we creep up to it. But yeah, I just want you guys to be aware. Next week is going to be a little bit wild for me from just like a personal life perspective. And I'll do my best to not let that impact basically the streaming schedule. Again, right, what our setup trigger here would be, right, is a breakdown here under low of day on increasing outlier volume. We're effectively looking for that high separation away from the opening range. For us to just target moves from current day's high, current day's low, I don't think that there's enough space there or enough conviction that we're guaranteed to retest the high or guaranteed to retest the low here on some follow through. So it's going to make it really hard for us to get that like range bound trade from a like risk reward perspective. So I would like to see a breakout here occur at some point. That would be fantastic, but I'm not going to force it or rush it if it isn't there. I think we've had a relatively good feel for how price action is going to move. We identified this pretty well pre-market. And so I don't really want to rush a bad decision here and kind of like discredit all that hard work. So again, right, trying to be very specific and very deliberate with how I want to see price action behave. Only when I see all those characteristics kind of line up and tell me the same story, will it be worth the risk of placing a trade. Right now, this is just low probability, pull your hair out type price action. And I've had enough of that this week. I'm honestly sick of it. Just to make the potential stream difficulties next week worth it, when I'm set up in my new place, gonna have about as good of a internet and streaming setup as possible. So I'm very much looking forward to having that all rocking and rolling. For me, still on CL, I have no interest in trading it during the contract roll. So here's kind of a big reason why. So if you look at some of these intraday candles, you see how some of them kind of look like they're gapping up or even gapping down, right? Where they're not opening at the previous candle's close, right? You see how that's occurring there on this bearish candle, right? The candle open occurred above the previous candle's close. This candle, right, opened below the previous candle's close, right? Like it's not opening up at the same spot. That for me tells me, right, that there's very like sporadic liquidity, or the liquidity that is available there is like it's too bouncy. The spread is too aggressive. And so that makes it very hard for me to trust that I'm actually going to get fills at the price that I want. Like it's not a good indication, right, of basically a consistent order book, right, of it being kind of strong and full. So for me, like it's the scariest thing to see, in my opinion, because best case scenario, it's a data issue from TradingView, right? Worst case scenario, it's like a Fugazi order book, and you can't really trust any of the narratives inside. So neither of those scenarios give me a particularly confident view that I know how price action is going to behave, or that that behavior of price action is going to be particularly repeatable. All right. So NQ, 5 seconds to go. Can it give me outlier? Probably not. Okay, nope. Close, but no. Same thing there on ES. So again, right, gonna wait for these 5-minute time frames, see if those can give me those opportunities. I'm not taking any compromised trades. Don't care if it runs, right? Having a setup trigger is not enough for me to want to take on a trade. And just trusting that my setup is going to bail me out of decisions is like the wrong relationship I want to have with my trading. I get bailed out from wrong trades or from losing a lot of money in the market because I'm a good risk manager, not because my setup trigger never loses. So I don't want to reward behaviors that are like overestimating the probability, right, of my setup working. My setup works when I lose small and I think about risk reward ratios, right, and work backwards to find my entry price. When I compromise those variables and I make like a compromised plan, it becomes a very slippery slope to start to make other kind of wrong decisions and to chase price action that isn't there. So when things are choppy and consolidating like this and not particularly fun to trade, I have to become more deliberate and more specific. Otherwise, I set myself up to have a day like yesterday where, like I said, right, I literally needed, like I went on tilt and got lucky, right? And so that's a huge warning sign for me. And if I choose to ignore that here today, I am the asshole, right? And as you can call me whatever you want, but I don't want to be that. And so I'd rather avoid, right, my obvious mistakes. Again, right, good example here would have been faked out. But I would rather be, yeah, the strict disciplinarian here today than like the rebel without a cause. I still want to see an increasing outlier volume reversal, right, for me to be able to trade any sort of scenario. So like if I get a replication there of like that 939 to 945, yes, that's a little bit of a more likely kind of trade. But I need to see that change in personality if I'm going to trust that I'm going to get that follow through here to the upside. Okay, so we got a minute to go here on this 5-min, 30 seconds. Again, doesn't look like it's going to be outlier volume. Kind of looks like it's going to be like a grind day, right? Not a particularly joyous bit of price action here. But I will say it's been a good dopamine detox day. So again, increasing but not outlier volume. So I wait, right? I think one of the important like tricks I love to use with trading is I think that the term being a disciplined trader is very misunderstood or very misused. So what I mean by that is I think that people have a very like vague definition of what being a disciplined trader actually looks like. And I think it doesn't give you a very accurate portrayal over what that actually is from like a execution perspective. The term that I prefer in that context is stubborn, right? I want to be a stubborn trader, and not stubborn as if I'm willing to like white knuckle trades and do these sort of things. But I want to be stubborn so that I'm only taking trades that exactly follow my rules, right? Stubborn people don't compromise. They do what they want when they want, right? And they don't do things that kind of make them uncomfortable. And so I think from like a trading perspective, being stubborn to my process on a day-to-day basis is a lot easier, or it's a lot of a calmer way for me to be able to justify what people would consider disciplined trading, right? When I'm stubborn about following my rules and being structured, then I'm effectively just looking for binary reactions to all the sort of checklist items, right, that I have along the way. And if I get everything kind of satisfied, right, and every criteria gets met, then I should have no reason to take that trade. It's effectively a way of like talking myself out of positions that are effectively a compromise or a trick or a trap or whatever you want to call it. So I love considering myself to be a stubborn trader. It's like the only time in my life that being considered stubborn has had a net positive for me. But I do think that from like a understanding of what discipline means as a trader, I think it's that stubbornness to only execute your rules and to ignore all the other compromises that ultimately makes you money. Now, the only trade I could have maybe reasonably taken here this morning, right, would have been this NQ breakdown on this bearish reversal. Now, we had a very high probability of this giving us a move down towards sort of that 330 area, which is where it's clicked here now. But the execution of this trade, right, my stop loss would have had to have been the high of this candle, this 956 candle, and I would have been stopped out prior to this big move occurring. So as much as I want to pretend that, hey, this would have been the winning trade, I should have FOMO about not taking this, that's categorically false. I would have lost money on this trade and felt very frustrated now seeing this thing break down and hit my eventual profit target. Now, if that pattern consistently repeats itself, right, where that aggressive technique stop loss, it constantly gets faked out before it goes, then we can change our stop loss technique to be high of our signal candle or confirmation candle, right, which is the same one in this context. And then we can look for entries that are maybe slightly more creative based on what we have. But for now, this is a little bit of an outlier reaction here to this PA. So I'm not going to overcorrect to try to solve for catching that immediate win. I'm still just going to try to play the balance of probabilities. My rules are set up and designed so that I'm taking advantage of, I don't know, 70%, right? 80% of price action. I'm not just taking advantage or trying to optimize to catch every play. Fundamentally, that's impossible. And I do think that's a little bit of where my ego has struggled here a little bit this week, where it's a really highly volatile environment. The potential to make a tremendous amount of money is there. And that makes it feel, right, as if every setup has a little bit more juice to it than it does. And generally that feeling in the moment is one that's like developed or created to overcome some anxiety, right? The feeling of hopium is kind of like the counter to missing something, right? Oh, I feel like this is going to move, so let me compromise the volume standard. Oh, I feel this is going to move, so let me compromise my entry price, right? Whatever it might be. And those things can ultimately be a very dangerous way to trade. Yeah, great eye, Sammy. Oh, yeah, 314. It'd be something like this. Now, for now, we're looking at the pullback entry technique, right? Because it hasn't made a lower low, never mind. Now we're looking at the pullback entry technique. Stop loss of 340. That means I need a 315 entry or better, right? Okay, now this is obviously breaking down here. Classic. We'll see if this can give me an increasing volume standard here, maybe now on one of these shorter time frames. This could also be effectively very similar setup, right? A breakdown here under 300, targeting a move then towards 18.2. One sec here, guys. One sec. Oh. Absolute scam call. Absolutely ridiculous. Again, now this move, right, to 268 and then a pullback here into 315. Not exactly a strong indication, right, of bearish continuation. If a move is strong, it generally doesn't make a 75-point move and then pull back. So we still have a bunch of time here left on these candles. If they can close up strong, maybe an opportunity. Otherwise, right, starting to maybe look and behave as if it's potential capitulation. Okay, so we'll pass on this burden of confirmation now to the 5 min. Let's see if we can get it. It's got to close under 300, right? Preferably around 290 or better. Otherwise, we're setting up here for that fake out scenario again. And that could be in play as well. So we've got a potential trigger here in both directions. Let's see if it can give us a high conviction close in the next $1.15. And go from there. I mean, maybe as a Canadian, instead of calling it a $1.15, I'm going to call it a loony 15. Really just doubled down on my roots. Okay, so we're looking for another 10 points here in the last 30-ish seconds. Very possible. Okay, how do we feel about this candle shape? Good enough? Not good enough? What do we think? Yeah, I think not good enough. And look at our leading names, right? So We talked about how they're all opening up in the implied middle of their ranges, and maybe the most likely outcome, right, based on that was a day of consolidation. That's kind of what we've seen here so far, right? Everything is still an inside bar. I'm trying to see if I can find an exception. Okay, NVIDIA, one exception. So pretty much across the board, right? NVIDIA and Google are the only names that are kind of dumping and dying. Everything else is still formal consolidation and no real indication that we have a strong kind of trending background. Now, NQ has an opportunity to go increasing volume here on this next 10-min candle, and that would give me plenty of space down towards sort of that 18,130 area if that could occur. So again, I'm not dead here, right? I still have potential opportunities to look at price action, but I'm trying to be so patient and deliberate and not force anything stupid, right, that I'm going to regret. So it has to be beyond perfect. Otherwise, I'm going to spend my weekend ranting and raving to my dog over what an idiot trader I am. And no one wants to feel that. So really just trying to slow down, right? Force myself to be deliberate, force myself to look at price action objectively, and not like fall for the trick or the trap of high volatility. It's annoying, but the market puts us in situations where often like doing the opposite of what it's like, what emotion it's trying to induce in us is often the best thing, right? So on trades where you feel like as if you have to rush in an entry, you can pretty much always get a better entry price. On setups that you think are going to run forever, it often goes the opposite way, right? Once you've entered your position. So we have to basically fight back against some of those impulses and like that, impulsive thinking and trading, because those feelings are not hardwired to do what's best for us. They're hardwired to do what's easiest. And what's easiest versus what's best as a trader is often a very different sort of set of circumstances. Again, right, we're looking like we should get that increasing outlier volume on this candle. We're setting up pretty nicely for that. And all we're looking for here now, right, is for it to close as a most bearish, second most bearish, or normal bearish type candle. And ideally, right, give us an appropriate risk reward zone so that we can target that 130-ish area. Now that's 140 odd points, right, which is more than enough follow through for us to all get paid and to have ourselves a fantastic day. But let's be deliberate, right? And not think in dollars and cents, but instead think about the technical elements that define our trades and make them strong. So 90 seconds to go here. A loony 20, right? So let's see if it wants to finish with that oomph. And so in this situation, right, I would be looking for a short, the bearish setup. And let's see if it can give us that nice look. Twenty seconds. And ideally, right, we want the bottom wick to be smaller than the top wick and smaller than the body of the candle. Kind of what we're looking for here. Probably a little bit larger than the body of the candle, than the top wick. So the only possible entry here would be on the pullback entry technique, which would still be that, 315 area. Guys, just trying to get into that zone. It's kind of right in that wheelhouse here now. So let's watch this reaction, right? And I would say so far, right, that 300 is acting more like support to the upside than it is like a retest and breakdown spot, right? So I'm like, hands are far away from my execution screen. I don't see the correct reaction to be able to jump into this position and take a long, or to take a short, sorry. And so I got a couple clues there, right? A, the candle maybe wasn't the perfect confirmation, right? And then the pullback here towards that 315 area, it's like it behaved as if the sellers weren't in that zone there at all, right? It cut through that like butter. It didn't have to experience any resistance or any challenges. It could just float higher. So none of those characteristics are particularly indicative of strong trending price action. And if we now think back, right, to some of the clues that we've gotten on some of our trades, we even talked about how if it gives you that 70-point pullback, it probably isn't very strong. And we saw that there on that first 10-minute candle, and then that weakness, right, ends up showing up, 10 minutes later. And yes, this trade would have stopped us out, right, regardless of if we got that first entry or the second one. So again, not lost any money here, and I've not talked myself into a compromised trade. So those are all positives. I think I've made probably 3 really good decisions here this morning. And yeah, in this context, right, really good is not one that's profitable, but I've, arguably protected myself from like $1,500 worth of drawdown or $1,500 worth of anxiety. And instead of like putting a water gun to my head and hoping that I'm going to behave well under duress, I can just not put myself into a challenging situation, and I can avoid what I consider to be obvious mistakes. It could be, yeah. It could be for sure. A little bit of a fake out lower, held above the bearish signal candle low. I could see that. Target would have to be high a day. You'd be risking as is about, 20 odd points. But what we want to see here now, right, is that previous high act as support. So make a little bit of a higher high and then a pullback, and not being able to really hold that blue line is maybe the one thing that would give me just an ounce of pause. But for sure could be in play. And 15 points of risk is a great opportunity. But again, right, everything we've seen here so far is failed moves. So I'm starting at the expectation that it's a failure until proven otherwise, right? Okay. So again, right now, this is the point where we want to see support hold. If support can't hold here, right, then base expectation is another fake out, shake out type scenario. Kind of bouncing higher slowly. Probably not the correct reaction. At least not yet. Better. So this be one contract, right? And I need a pullback right under 49 as a bare minimum to justify my position sizing. Okay, so still watching closely here. I have just a little bit too much risk to pull the trigger. Right, I'd be risking about $620 here a contract. That's a little bit more than I'd like. I got to tighten it up a little bit. I could potentially look at this on the 5-min and set my stop loss to be 33. But I would rather this as my sort of scenario here. So still watching very closely. Let's see how this candle closes. I have my finger on the trigger. Everything's set up. Stop loss set 18,324. Hey guys, I am in. Average price 343. So let's even get that immediate explosion here. Otherwise, got to get out. So let's even get over that 350 here. Come on, give me that crack. Come on. There it goes. Starting to move nicely here, team. So let's see if this can keep pushing up and give me some nice follow through. This feels so much calmer, right? So much calmer. So now we're trying to look for a breakout here above this high, right? That red candle high. Ooh, I don't like that pullback. Okay, guys, I have closed that trade there. I have closed this trade at 345 for a $30 win. I do not like that little pullback it gave me on that failed higher high. Not a sign of strength. So I'm going to get out of this trade and either look for another potential entry, right? If it wants to give me another setup trigger, but I'm not interested in letting this trade go red. Yeah, maybe that was the wrong decision, but I would rather be too cautious than too aggressive. And I don't think that the failed breakout and pull back to my entry price is a very good indication of healthy trending price action. And you know what? That was a really good decision, right? Would have stopped us out. So yeah, I think that was a really positive decision. And one that was only made, right, because we remained calm and objective over what we wanted to see price action do. A failed breakout above high a day, not a strong reaction from price action. So, okay, maybe could have done a little bit better, right? Closed it when I was up at 320 bucks or whatever it was. But you know what? That was a good decision. It was a very controlled dopamine outcome. And saved myself some money, right? So really, really good. And Steven, right, it was the right decision to close where you did. So in your journal, right, that should be what you need to remind yourself of. Right? Hey, my gut was lying to me. It was trying to trick me into holding on to a trade that I didn't feel conviction in. That's a good data point to be aware of, right? And yeah, that was a really good, not a good outcome, but it was a very good process-based decision, team. So, okay, I'm not going to spend, I mean, I'll spend it all in one place here today in my P&L. I'll get laughed out of the Lambo dealership, but I'm much happier about this trade, right, than any of the trades I took yesterday. Because this was executed as well as I could have. No, but it might give you pink eye, Steven. Oh, okay. 30 bucks on the day. Not enough volume there. Increasing, not outlier. So again, right, need to see a volume standard above that white line. Hasn't occurred. So really good example here today, and kind of a nice reward, I think, after a challenging week to have a trade that you honestly you saw it well, right? I think that's ultimately a really positive thing to have taken from that, although it's maybe not the P&L that I would have wanted on that decision. Once I was in the position, I fought back against like the anxiety and the greed and the stress and the whatever, right? To try to force a P&L number that wasn't there. We spent a little bit of time maybe in the early 10 o'clock hour of how we want to define how we want to see price action behave once we've entered a trade, right? Before we've entered a trade. And we did a really good job there of, at least I think I had a good plan in my mind over what I wanted to see price behave within the context, and then had the courage, right, to trust that decision and get out of a trade before it became a loss. It sucks when you wait all day and this is all you get. But if I'm talking about trading to make money versus trading to be entertaining, this is a much more scalable process. Yeah, I would give yourselves all a big pat on the back, because if you behave like that on every position and you're objective like that on every position, game's a lot more fun. And the fun in trading, right, isn't, and this is where I maybe struggle sometimes, right? The fun in trading isn't being in a position and having a horse to bet on. It's seeing the results of all your hard work that gives you the freedom that you can do what you want, when you want, how you want, right? So not allowing us to become a slave to our P&L, and instead just putting all of our emphasis into the quality of our process generates for us a lot more freedom than needing a big P&L hit on every decision. And yeah, I'm trying to hold myself here or remind myself these things where it maybe comes off as like braggy, or it comes off as maybe like a little bit too much praise. But what I'm trying to do here, right, is counter the evidence that I got from myself there yesterday of how breaking a rule made me money. So I held myself and was like very mad at myself, right, yesterday there, that was how I behaved, and how I kind of like gave up control, right, to a certain extent. And so today I'm trying to remind myself, right, that when I follow my process, when I stick to my rules, when I follow my guns, right, that I actually trade well and I execute with the level of technical proficiency that I lack when I'm trading in like that compromised emotional state. So the more that I remind myself, right, of the benefits of being that stubborn trader, like we've talked about, the more that I kind of hardwire those patterns and like tell my dopamine systems that this is the thing to reward myself for, right? And after a period where I've maybe deviated away from that a little bit, supported by some really, really tremendous trading P&L and trading profits, that becomes the thing to focus on, because I've had a really good start to the year. I've made a lot of money this year trading, not because I'm swinging harder, but because I've been putting a larger emphasis there on that technical proficiency. So any opportunity where I can catch myself deviating away from that and going more ego based instead of process based, I need to hold myself to a very strict standard and like reprimand myself to know that, hey, this is a negative, right? I can't be doing this. I have to like slap myself on the wrist with like the springiest ruler I can possibly find. And on the flip side, right, when I do get the behaviors that I want to see here in my own personal trading, I have like the correct emotional reaction to price action. Then I also want to be rewarding those behaviors and giving myself kind of like the pat on the back, like I'm doing here right now, so that it becomes what I get validation from, right? So I overcorrected one way. I'm trying to overcorrect the other. And I think that, after a little period, right, of this extreme focus on the process, it'll be back to that kind of happy medium where you're able to execute things ruthlessly. I'll give you guys like a breakdown here into my thought process, but I think I've had two trades in the last quarter, right, that I've not been particularly happy about. One that I had yesterday, I was not particularly happy about, and then we had that mean reversion trade that effectively was like no stop loss, right, and just like chaos and stress and anxiety. And so both of those are not great feelings, right? But it's only like 2%, right, of my trades in the last month, maybe even less. But I want to make sure that I'm not allowing that to compound into more negative decisions and more negative outcomes. So catch yourself slipping, right, before you do anything crazy, and you stay in the game. I mean, it very much could. We haven't seen price action sustain moves lower, but we're still looking for that same oomph, right, that we wanted to see here on this 3-min candle. So if we're going to say that 300 is acting as support, we're going to need another outlier volume breakout separating away from 300. Oh, I was going to say, right, if I had a day here today where I didn't think that I was behaving well from a process-based perspective, the punishment I had in line for myself was to go back to trading micros, right? Or to trade micros in general. So basically force myself, right, to rein in that dopamine if I couldn't prove to myself that I could do it, and kind of like control my emotional state. And for sure, if I'm thinking back to the trade we took here already this morning, like I definitely felt a little bit like nervous sharing that with you all, right? I definitely didn't want that trade to be a loser. I didn't want that to be the sort of case. So like that fear, I think, was a very positive factor here in my ability to actually execute this. Like that little extra level of paranoia, I think, was very positive. Right? I don't want to break a rule. I didn't want to break a process. I didn't want to make a silly, avoidable mistake. Because if I did that, I'm going to trade micros, right? Until I can kind of fix some of those dopamine receptors. So yeah, I agree, Igor. It did feel a little bit like a baseline trade. And again, if I'm giving myself a score for how I behaved there, I'm giving myself an A+. I nailed that, right? Okay, maybe I didn't close my trade at my max P&L, but I didn't get emotionally attached to that, and I found it easy to close. And that for me is tremendous progress. Really good. I'm really happy with that. And I want to preface this, right? Like the language that I'm using here to describe my trading is pretty harsh, right? It's sounding as if I'm in like a midlife crisis, and that isn't the case, right? And it has been a tremendous run of form here. Been trading really well most of the time, or the vast majority of the time, right? Like I said, 80% of my days, a little bit more than 80% of my days are finishing green. So all I'm trying to do, right, is just hold myself to a standard that would make most people uncomfortable. I say that all the time. It's one of my favorite kind of things to remind myself of. And so, yeah, being strict with myself, right, holding myself to that high standard, expecting good things from me and my trading. I think it's important. I almost have like that irrational self-belief that if I execute and follow my rules, I'm going to be really successful. If I'm unable to trust those processes, then I'm going to deviate away from them. And so I want to reward every opportunity, right, where, yeah, I follow my structures well and it's the right decision. And today it's been a really good variant of that. It's a good question, Sammy. So I think there's a couple things I would need to see before I'd be willing to trust a scenario here again. Like if I could get a fake out lower and then I move back above 300, I think that would be a really good opportunity. Or I would need to see some sort of indication, right, of like a change in personality. So if we think back to that first trade, right, like the one we took 10 minutes ago, it's more that we want to now see it not pull back towards the entry price, right? So what we saw there a couple times on that trade is it made higher highs, flirted with that blue line, got back above, flirted back with that blue line, got back above, right? Flirted, got back, and then failed breakout, and then back to that line. So when we see price action give us another opportunity to set back up, I would like to see a scenario, right, or an indication that it's moving in a little bit of a more like linear fashion. I don't want to see it be particularly bouncy post confirmation, because then that's going to give me deja vu to effectively that initial first setup. So if this thing gives me outlier volume here in the next 5 seconds, I think is a little bit unlikely. I want to make sure, right, that it's giving me a different reaction to price action. The alternative, right, to that in between this range would be for us to get that set up and breakout over that 360, 650 area, i.e. get a breakout over the zone where we've seen price action fail here before. So if I see kind of both of those things all coincide, then maybe on this like 5-min time frame, right, I could be in really good shape to then be able to get that follow through up towards that 18.5 area. So now, right, we're looking to see a breakout and hold above that blue line. And we're looking for increasing outlier volume and a strong candle shape. I can't really give you a binary response to that, to be honest, Sammy, right? Each trade is going to have its kind of own specifics and own characteristics. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit longer for trades to come together and to give you an entry, and that's fine as long as you haven't invalidated how you wanted to have seen price action behave. I would be okay with that thesis in general, right? If it's occurring on like the pullback entry technique where it's like slow consolidation inside our confirmation candle, if it gave me that like fake out higher high and then a pullback, right, and kind of go into, then that gives me a little bit of a smoother scenario. But yeah, if it's confined inside the candle, I think that's a little bit easier to view it that way. If it gives me the aggressive, right, or sets up for the aggressive and then continues to pull back, that for me would be more sign of a consolidation move, right, or a fake out move. So I wouldn't want to be super aggressive until I see that personality change. Interesting. Yeah. So this could potentially be in play for us here as well. Pretty good volume, right? Want to see it hold above 400. Okay, didn't do so on the 3-min. So again, we'll pass this on to the 5. 50 seconds to go. It's got to close 10 points higher. Target would have to be 340. Oops, wrong one. You'd have to look at something like this. I wouldn't be super enthusiastic about. The thing you guys just heard was a 2-min bearish reversal on ES. And I'm not going to aggressively trade this scenario here. I prefer to default those to the longer time frames. But I think I can talk myself out of pretty much all these setups here so far. Maybe we can play some of these 15 mins. So just sitting here eating ice cream sandwich, reminding myself life is great, and waiting to see if I can get that outlier volume standard here. If not, I'll just walk away and start the weekend early. I don't have to force it if it isn't there. All things considered, I think I've navigated things pretty well here today. And even if the P&L isn't what I wanted, or as extreme as I would have wanted, right? It would have been great to have a 10K day. I'm not here to judge myself on the P&L. I'm certainly not going to hold it against myself that isn't what I'm walking away with. I'm trying to judge myself on my ability to remain in control and to follow my rules and trust my process. And today, been really good at that. So everything else is not worth compromising over. So 50 seconds to go. It should get there. Okay, so last thing to watch out for, right? Close above 400. Good close. So immediately we know it has to be the aggressive entry technique. And we're targeting high of day. Can't really pull too much further back. Otherwise, I'll start to run out of space to be able to get my position sizing. ES, the same setup, but no space here to the upside. We're pushing it here. Me a little bit tight. 28 points of risk as is. It's probably too much. Yeah. Way to go, CL. Way to go. Yeah, this is now invalidating me from a position sizing perspective. I have to walk away. Not worth it. All right, team. I don't think I'm going to do anything else here. Giving the market every chance I possibly can to give me some volatility that I can take advantage of. Not really getting those looks. So I'd rather, yeah, just go set up for a nice long weekend instead of, yeah, risking giving away even 29 bucks. It's not worth the stress. Hey, cheers, Sammy. Yeah, this one back to Montreal, no big deal. The one from Montreal to Whistler, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about that drive for 10 days. I'm not looking forward to it. Yeah, happy Easter to everyone as well. Hey, thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Yeah, just the one trade here today. Honestly, like a negligible win. Caught like 2 points. Basically, price action gave us a failed breakout. And so it just closed it before it ever ended up stopping us out. So it was a really good process-based trade here today, but just not the maybe P&L outcome we would have wanted. It is what it is. Like I said, I feel very, yeah, I mean this in the right way, but I feel very vindicated here today about just the value of following my rules, right, and trusting my process. Like just seeing the confidence in how that's protected me from having a red day here today is a really good feeling. As I think a little bit this week, I was teetering on the edge a bit. And maybe that's, yeah, me introducing some of my personal life shit into this or whatever it is. I get it's kind of frustrating. I should not be bringing that here to the stream, but we're all human. We all make mistakes. And if you're a trader, you're going to make millions of mistakes over the course of your career. And so it's just finding joy and pleasure in fixing those mistakes. And yeah, protecting that mental capital, like you're saying, that puts us, puts you in a much better place to compound good decisions and ultimately make money, right? So from that perspective, maybe today wasn't a very profitable day, but it set me up to be very profitable. And you know what? I can't complain. My account's sitting at all-time highs. even if it's just by a smidge. So I'll take it. Kind of one of those weeks where it's almost better to be lucky than good. So I'm gonna take that gift and run with it. I'll go final call for questions here, team. Final call for questions. Yeah, kind of that choppy grind. Generally on OPEX, it's like a little bit more of a bearish bias, right, than a bullish bias. But I wonder, because the VIX has been elevated for so long here, Robert, I wonder if that's priced out a lot of the volume on the options. Yeah, we'll crush next week. I'm not worried about that. All right, team. Well, that's going to be it for me here today. Same deal like always, right? If you have any questions, hit me up outside of market hours, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. But just want to say thank you to everyone, right, for tuning in, for asking great questions, for listening to me rant and rave here like an absolute lunatic. I can't always promise you that the stream is always going to be pretty, but I always promise to you guys that I will be my most honest and most transparent, and do whatever I can to make sure that I'm bringing the best version of myself here on a daily basis. I think, yeah, like at least for myself on a personal level, dealing with some frustrating price action and sharing those anxieties with you as a team, for me is very humbling, and it's not something that I particularly enjoy. And I play this game because I love it and I find passion in it. And for me, it's self-improvement gamified. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to get humbled. We have to get our ass kicked so that we can figure out, hey, what we need to fix and improve. And we need to figure out where our issues are. And this week was a really good reminder that even though I've been playing this game for 13 years and it's been a successful way for me to make a living, that I can still make mistakes, that I can still have psychological breakdowns, that I could still have scenarios where I'm like too willing to break my rules. And so happy to have caught myself, right? Instead of allowing those things to compound, I'm happy with the work that I put in to evaluate that, right? To kind of reset the mindset to get fresh and to get sharp. And yeah, I am happy that I'm walking away green here on the week. I shouldn't have been, right? I keep saying that. This is not a week where I probably should have made money. I made money because I broke my rules, not because I followed them as well as I could have. And yeah, that's something to continue to consider, right? And not allow that bit of data to trick me into thinking that, hey, my shit don't stink and I'm always going to be correct and all those sort of things. So yeah, very, very humbling week. Learned a lot here about myself, learned a lot about what I need to work on, but also happy, right? I'm proud of how I navigated this. I'm proud that I didn't compound mistakes, and I'm proud of myself that I was able to honestly rein it back in here in a very aggressive fashion today. I think if we look at the price action, very easy to have also kind of gotten like that tunnel vision on PA here today, and I didn't allow that to happen. And so from that perspective, I'm very proud of myself. I had a really good, strong start to the week here from a process-based perspective. I had kind of a process-based lapse there yesterday, and then finish off the week, right? Bookend it with another really good process-based win. So obsessing over the quality of my decisions instead of the quality of my P&L always makes me more money in the long term. And today I even got short-term validation of that. And so I'm extremely grateful. Like always, guys, right? I want to share this with you all. I'm extremely grateful that we all get to do this here on a daily basis, and I get to share this experience with you all. It is something that I look forward to on a daily basis, and it's something that I take a tremendous amount of pride in. So just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in, for watching, for being a part of the team, for being supportive, for understanding and sympathizing with me, right? As I am a volatile, emotional nightmare sometimes. And so just want to say thank you to everyone for making this job so much easier for me, and for being awesome team members, awesome clients, and for giving me something that, like I said, I look forward to every single day. So I do fundamentally believe that working with each and every one of you makes me a better trader, and the improvements that that's created for me in my career, I will be forever and eternally grateful to you all for giving me that opportunity. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching in this week, tuning in, asking great questions, and for being just awesome people to work with. I couldn't ask for a better bunch or a stronger community. And I want you all to succeed, and I want you all to crush. And I'm very emotionally invested in your guys' success. So let's make sure that we all kind of get on the same page here, start crushing it, and get back to where we belong, where we're not finishing off the week with luck, we're finishing off the week with skill. And I know that if we all do that here, we're gonna keep doing really, really good things. Appreciate that, team. And yeah, guys, like I said, right, I will always, like, for lack of a better term, right, there are too many people here that watch on a daily basis that I'm speaking with on a daily basis, where if I apply a filter, or like I try to hide things or do whatever, it's impossible for me to behave that way. I don't have the capacity to do that. So my promise here always is to give you guys as much honesty and transparency as I can inside these streams, to walk you through exactly why I'm feeling certain ways, how I'm feeling certain ways, and hopefully showing you a good example of how to bounce back from those mistakes, right? Or how to compound positive decisions. And so, yeah, not maybe the prettiest of weeks, but a really important one. And I think where we build the most confidence as traders is when we make mistakes, fix them, and then get to new P&L all-time highs, right? That's ultimately how you build confidence here as a trader. And today we took that really important, hardest first step towards, right, detaching ourselves from the dopamine and the ego and putting ourselves in good situations. I think objectively, every trade that we could have talked ourselves into here today would have at some point turned into a loss. And so I don't want to overrate my ability to have made more money today, right? I think I saw the market well. I think I read price action smoothly. And I think I built up some nice proof of concept that I can keep working on improving with. So appreciate you all. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And yeah, glad to be sitting here at P&L all-time highs, even if maybe I don't particularly deserve it. So have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day here, team. Enjoy your long weekends. Stuff yourself silly with Cadbury mini eggs and all the beautiful kind of Easter treats. From my perspective, I'm ethnically Polish, and Easter for me is like my favorite time of year for Polish food. There's a soup, and this is maybe too much information, but I'll leave you guys on this. But there's a soup. It's called a żurek. And what that is it's like a fermented sour rye soup with sausages and potatoes, and it's so good. Like, think about it. If you had a sourdough loaf that was a bread, and it had, that was, sorry, sourdough loaf that was a soup, and it had, all the, like, the heartiest vegetables and all this kind of stuff. So my objective here today, tomorrow, is make a bunch of that, eat a bunch of that, and then drive back to Montreal with a full belly and yeah, warm stomach. So I hope you guys also have a great weekend with your families, refresh, recharge, and rebuild that mental capital. And we'll be back here tomorrow to kind of finish off the last week of spring trading before we transition into the summertime magic. So I'm looking forward to kind of taking that next step with everyone. And I can't wait to see what we accomplish next week. So have yourselves a great day, team, and we'll talk soon.